The icy winds of Christmas Eve tore through the dimly lit streets, carrying an air of desolation. Ethan Crawford, a seasoned 40-year-old nurse, quickened his pace, eager to escape the bitter cold and the weight of another grueling hospital shift. His breath puffed visibly in the frigid air as his footsteps echoed sharply against the concrete, a reminder of how eerily quiet the world seemed. Then he heard it, a faint, muffled cry. He stopped abruptly, his pulse quickening. The fragile and fragmented sound seemed to beckon him from the shadows of a narrow alley to his right. Ethan hesitated, exhaustion weighing heavily on his shoulders. It had been a long day, and the thought of dealing with anything more felt almost unbearable. But his instincts, honed over years of nursing, urged him to investigate. "Hello?" he called out, his voice cutting through the stillness. The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so taut it felt like the city was holding its breath. Ethan stepped cautiously into the alley, the darkness thick and suffocating. His eyes adjusted slowly, revealing two small figures huddled against the cold brick wall. The sight rooted him to the spot, two little girls, no older than 6, with identical features. Tangled blonde hair framing pale faces and wide, terrified blue eyes. They clung to each other, trembling, their thin, inadequate clothing doing little to shield them from the winter's cruelty. He crouched down, his heart tightening as he saw their purple lips and reddened cheeks. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice deliberately gentle. "It's okay. I'm Ethan. Are you hurt?" The girls exchanged hesitant glances, fear evident in their young faces. The braver of the two finally spoke, her voice small but determined. "We're hungry." Ethan felt a pang of anguish. "What are your names?" he asked, trying to coax them into trust. "Where are your parents?" "I'm Sophie," the older one answered, her voice trembling. She motioned toward the other girl. "That's Lily, our mom. She left us here." Her words struck him like a blow. Left them? On Christmas Eve? His childhood memories surfaced. Nights of uncertainty, hunger, and fear. Pushing the painful recollections aside, Ethan extended his hands. "Come on," he said, his tone firm but kind. "Let's get you out of the cold." The girls hesitated, their tiny frames shaking with both fear and frost. Sensing their distrust, Ethan added, "I promise I won't hurt you. I have food at home, and we can figure out what to do from there." Another silent exchange passed between Sophie and Lily before they each reached for Ethan's hands. As their tiny, icy fingers gripped him, a wave of responsibility washed over him. These weren't just children in need. They were reminders of a past he'd fought to escape. The walk home was heavier than Ethan expected. Each step felt weighted with questions that swirled in his mind. What am I doing? Am I making a mistake? He glanced down at Sophie and Lily, their fragile frames trudging beside him. Sophie clung tightly to his hand while Lily stayed silent, her free hand gripping the edge of her sister's coat. Neither had said much since they left the alley. "I live just a few blocks away," Ethan said, hoping to reassure them. "It's warm and my mom. I'll be happy to see you." Sophie looked up at him, her expression skeptical but curious. "Your mom?" "Yes," Ethan replied, his voice softening. "Her name is Amelia. She's not well, but she's kind. She'll like you both." He tried to sound confident, though inwardly, he doubted his ability to juggle everything. His mother's condition had worsened in recent months, leaving her housebound and frail. How could he explain bringing home 2 abandoned children on Christmas Eve? As they reached his small house, Ethan paused at the door. The windows glowed softly with the light of the Christmas tree, but the house itself was quiet. Too quiet, he thought. Taking a steadying breath, he knelt to address the girls. "It's going to be okay," he said, forcing a smile. "Let's go inside and warm up." When he pushed the door open, warmth and the faint scent of cinnamon greeted them. "Ethan," a weak voice called from the living room. "Is that you?" "It's me, Mom," Ethan answered, his voice faltering slightly. "And I brought company." He stepped into the living room, guiding the girls with him. Standing in her favorite armchair by the Christmas tree, Amelia Crawford looked up in surprise. Despite her pale complexion and frail frame, Her eyes widened with concern and curiosity as she saw the two shivering children. "Who are these little ones?" she asked, her voice gentle but strained. Ethan hesitated. "This is Sophie and Lily," he said. I found them outside. They were alone. I couldn't leave them out there." Amelia's face softened, her hands instinctively reaching out. "Oh, you poor things," she murmured. "Come here, dears. You must be freezing." The girls hesitated, looking to Ethan for reassurance. He nodded gently, and Sophie led Lily toward Amelia, who wrapped them both in a thick blanket. "Let me warm you up," Amelia said, stroking their hair with maternal tenderness. "Ethan, get them something hot to eat." Ethan hurried to the kitchen, rummaging through the cupboards for soup and bread. As he heated the meal, he could hear Amelia's soft voice as she spoke to the girls. "Where are your parents, my darlings?" she asked. "Our mom left us," Sophie whispered. "She said she'd be back, but she never returns." Amelia's gasp was almost inaudible, but Ethan heard it. His heart ached as he stirred the soup. How could anyone abandon their children like this? When he returned with 2 steaming bowls, he found a scene that made him pause. Amelia, who had been so weak and withdrawn in recent months, seemed rejuvenated. She cradled the girls close, her face alight with purpose. Still wary but visibly comforted, Sophie and Lily huddled beside her in the armchair. "Here you go," Ethan said, handing them the bowls. "Eat up." The girls ate hungrily, their tiny hands clutching the bowls as if afraid the food might vanish. Amelia beckoned Ethan closer, her voice low. "What do you plan to do, Ethan?" she asked, concern lacing her tone. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'll call the police or social services, but not tonight. I couldn't bear to send them to a shelter on Christmas Eve." Amelia nodded, her eyes glistening. "We'll figure it out, but they're safe here. For now." As the girls finished their meal, Lily looked up shyly. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. Sophie added, "We haven't had food this good in a long time." Ethan smiled, his chest tightening. "You're welcome," he said. "You're safe here." As the evening wore on, the once somber house came alive with unexpected warmth. Amelia, who had spent months confined to her armchair in silence, now moved with an energy Ethan hadn't seen in years. She led Sophie and Lily to the Christmas tree, helping them hang ornaments and telling them stories of Christmases long ago. "You know," Amelia said, her voice light, "when Ethan was your age, he tried to decorate the tree by himself and ended up knocking it over. Broke half the ornaments." Sophie giggled, the sound tentative but actual. "Did you really?" she asked, glancing at Ethan. Ethan laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Guilty as charged. I wasn't the most graceful kid." As the hours passed, Ethan felt a strange sense of peace. The house, which had felt so empty for so long, now brimmed with life. Laughter echoed in the small living room, mingling with the soft glow of the Christmas lights. Later that night, Ethan found himself torn as he prepared to leave for his night shift at the hospital. "Mom," he said hesitantly, "are you sure you'll be okay with them?" Amelia looked up from the couch, where Sophie and Lily were nestled beside her. "Ethan, for the first time in months, I feel like I have a reason to get up in the morning." "Go. I'll take care of them." Ethan knelt in front of the girls. "Sophie, Lily, I must go to work, but I'll return in the morning. You'll be safe here with my mom, okay?" Sophie nodded solemnly while Lily whispered, "Promise?" "I promise," Ethan said, his voice firm. "You're safe now." As he stepped out into the cold night, Ethan couldn't help but glance back at the warm glow of the house. For the first time in years, it felt like Christmas. And though questions about the girl's future loomed, he knew one thing for sure. This night had changed everything. The streets were eerily quiet as Ethan went to the hospital, his thoughts clouded with worry. Sophie and Lily's faces lingered in his mind, the fear in their wide eyes, the quiet resignation in their voices. How long had they been left to fend for themselves? And why? The questions gnawed at him, and he knew he couldn't let them remain unanswered. The hospital was bustling for Christmas Eve, with emergencies piling up. Ethan moved through his shift on autopilot, but his mind was elsewhere. During a rare moment of respite, he logged into the hospital's database and searched for clues. Using the approximate ages of the girls and their descriptions, he combed through local records of reported child neglect. His heart sank when he came across an article from a local news outlet. Mother loses custody of twin girls due to neglect. The accompanying photo was unmistakable. Sophie and Lily, a little younger, stood in front of a rundown house, their tiny hands clutching each other tightly. The story detailed their mother's history of alcohol abuse, repeated welfare checks, and a court order that temporarily placed the twins in foster care. But there was more. A note in the article mentioned their return to their mother after she claimed sobriety. And yet, here they are, abandoned again. Ethan thought grimly. He scrolled further, finding police records that painted a bleaker picture. Late-night calls for domestic disputes, neighbors reporting shouting, and even instances where the twins had been found wandering the streets unsupervised. Ethan leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed. His past encounters with children in distress had prepared him for many scenarios, but this felt deeply personal. He saw pieces of himself in their story, shadows of his childhood struggles. How can I help them when I'm barely holding it together? He wondered. But deep down, he already knew the answer. He had to try, no matter how complicated it would get. By the time his shift ended, the first light of Christmas morning was breaking through the horizon. Ethan rushed home, the cold biting at his face, but the warmth in his chest propelled him forward. He quietly unlocked the door, expecting to find the house still and silent. Instead, the sound of laughter greeted him. It was soft, almost hesitant, but unmistakably joyful. Ethan stepped into the living room to find a scene that stopped him in his tracks. His mother, Amelia, who had barely had the strength to leave her chair in months, was sitting on the floor with Sophie and Lily. Scraps of colored paper and glitter littered the rug as they worked on makeshift Christmas decorations. Amelia's cheeks were flushed with energy, her voice animated as she guided the girls in crafting a star for the top of the tree. Sophie and Lily looked completely transformed, relaxed, even happy, their trust in Amelia evident in the way they leaned into her care. "Ethan," Amelia called out, noticing him at the doorway. "Look at what we've been up to. The girls have been teaching me how to make decorations." Ethan couldn't help but smile, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "It looks like you've been busy." Sophie looked up shyly. "Your mom told us stories about when you were little. Did you try to build a rocket in the kitchen?" Ethan laughed, kneeling beside them. "I might have, and I might have almost set the curtains on fire." The girls giggled, and for a moment, it felt as though they had always been there, a part of his family. Amelia leaned closer to Ethan and whispered, "These girls, they've brought something back into this house. Into me. We can't let them go." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. "We won't, Mom. Not if I can help it." Later that afternoon, as the house bustled with activity, a knock at the door shattered the cozy atmosphere. Ethan exchanged a concerned glance with Amelia before opening it to find a woman standing on the porch. She was in her mid-30s, her face lined with stress and weariness, her clothes clean but worn. In her hand, she clutched a clipboard. "Good afternoon," the woman said, her tone professional but kind. "I'm Linda Carter from Child Protective Services. I'm here to talk about Sophie and Lily." Ethan's stomach dropped. He stepped aside to let Linda in, motioning her to the living room. Sophie and Lily froze at the sight of the stranger, their hands gripping Amelia's sweater tightly. "It's okay," Ethan said softly. "She's here to help." Linda crouched down to the girl's level, her expression gentle. "Hi, Sophie." "Hi, Lily. My name's Linda. I'm here to make sure you're safe." The girls didn't respond, their fear palpable. Amelia squeezed their shoulders reassuringly. "You're safe here, my loves," she said firmly. Ethan led Linda to the kitchen, his mind racing. "I found them alone in an alley last night," he explained, recounting the events of the past 24 hours. "They were freezing, hungry. I couldn't leave them out there." Linda listened intently, her pen scribbling across her notepad. When he finished, she sighed. "Ethan, I understand your intentions were good, but this situation is complicated. You should have called us immediately." "I couldn't," Ethan said, his voice rising slightly. "It was Christmas Eve. They were terrified. Sending them to a shelter felt wrong. Linda softened. I get it. But now that I'm involved, we have to follow procedure. Do you know anything about their mother? Ethan hesitated. I found some records. Her name is Claire Bennett. She has a history of neglect, and she abandoned them last night. Linda nodded grimly. That matches what we have on file. Claire's rights haven't been terminated, so technically, she still has legal custody. We'll need to investigate further. The words hit Ethan like a blow. You're saying they might have to go back to her? If she can prove she's fit, Linda said. But if not, we'll explore other options, including temporary foster care. Ethan clenched his fists. They don't need foster care. They need stability. They need to stay here with us. Linda gave him a measured look. That's a possibility, but it's a long process. Are you ready for that kind of commitment? Ethan didn't hesitate. Absolutely. As Linda prepared to leave, she turned to Sophie and Lily, who were still clinging to Amelia. You're lucky to have found someone who cares about you, she said gently. But this isn't over. I'll be in touch. When the door closed behind her, Ethan returned to the living room. Sophie looked up at him, her voice trembling. Are they going to take us away? Ethan knelt, meeting her eyes. Not if I can help it, he said firmly. You're safe here. This is your home now. Amelia nodded, her voice steady. We're not giving up on you. As Sophie and Lily clung to them, Ethan realized how much was at stake. This wasn't just about saving two little girls, but giving them a chance at a life they'd been denied. And no matter how hard the road ahead would be, Ethan knew he would fight for them with everything he had. The following morning, Ethan woke to the sound of quiet voices from the living room. He found Sophie and Lily seated on the floor with Amelia, working on a jigsaw puzzle. It was a peaceful scene, but the weight of the previous day's visit from Child Protective Services hung heavily over him. Ethan grabbed a cup of coffee and sat at the dining table, pulling out his laptop. He began researching custody laws, foster care systems, and legal options. Every article and forum he read confirmed his fears. Keeping the girls would be an uphill battle, but as he glanced at the laughter-filled living room, he knew he had no choice but to fight. His research was interrupted by the doorbell. Ethan opened the door to find Linda Carter standing again, clipboard in hand. Good morning, Ethan, she said. I need to ask you some additional questions and speak to the girls if they're ready. Ethan let her in, his unease growing. Linda joined the girls in the living room, crouching down to their level. Sophie and Lily immediately tensed, their earlier laughter vanishing. Hi, girls, Linda said softly. I just want to ask you a few things, okay? You're not in trouble. Sophie looked at Ethan, her eyes silently pleading for reassurance. He nodded, giving her a small smile. It's okay, he said. I'll be right here. Linda began her questioning gently. Can you tell me about your mom? She asked. Sophie hesitated, her small hands twisting in her lap. She used to be nice, she said finally. But then she started drinking a lot. She'd yell and sometimes forget to feed us. Lily's quiet but steady voice added, she left us in the alley. She said she'd be back, but she didn't come. Linda nodded, her expression compassionate but professional. Thank you for telling me, she said. You've both been courageous. As Linda stood to leave, she motioned for Ethan to join her in the kitchen. Their story matches what we know about Claire, she said, but she still has legal rights. If she comes forward and wants custody, things could get complicated. Ethan's jaw tightened. What if she hasn't changed? What if the girls return and end up in the same situation? Or worse? Linda sighed. That's why we investigate. But Ethan, you should prepare yourself. This could take months, even years. Are you ready for that? Ethan didn't hesitate. I'll do whatever it takes. That afternoon, Ethan decided to dig deeper into Claire's background. He called Dr. Anna Blake, a friend and colleague with access to medical records. Anna, he began cautiously, I need a favor. It's about two little girls I'm trying to help. Anna listened as Ethan explained the situation, then agreed to look into any records related to Claire Bennett. A few hours later, she called him back, her tone somber. Ethan, I found several reports of neglect and abuse, she said. The girls were brought to the ER multiple times. Malnutrition, unexplained bruises, even burns. It's all in the system. Ethan's stomach churned as he processed the information. Thank you, Anna, he said. This could help me make a case. The next day, as he was preparing a folder of evidence to present to CPS, the doorbell rang again. To his surprise, it wasn't Linda. It was Claire Bennett. She stood on the porch, her appearance disheveled but sober. Her eyes darted nervously as she clutched a tattered handbag. I want to see my girls, she said, trembling. Ethan blocked the doorway, his body tense. Claire, this isn't the time or place. You abandoned them. They're just starting to feel safe. I didn't mean to leave them, she said desperately. I was overwhelmed. I'm sober now. I'm trying to get my life together. Ethan studied her face, searching for sincerity. He saw traces of guilt, exhaustion, and perhaps genuine remorse. You should talk to CPS, he said finally. They're handling this. I just want to see them, Claire pleaded. Please. Ethan hesitated, then sighed. Wait here. He walked into the living room, where Sophie and Lily were coloring at the table. Girls, he said softly, crouching to their level. Your mom is here. She wants to see you. Lily shrank back immediately, clinging to Sophie. We don't want to go with her, she whispered. We want to stay here. You don't have to go anywhere, Ethan reassured them. But would you like to talk to her? Sophie exchanged a glance with Lily, then nodded hesitantly. Okay, she said, her voice barely audible. Ethan brought Claire into the room, keeping a careful distance. Sophie and Lily sat close together, their small faces wary. Claire knelt in front of them, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I made so many mistakes, but I love you. I never stopped loving you. Lily didn't respond, but Sophie asked, Why did you leave us? Claire's sobs grew louder. I thought you'd be better off without me. I was wrong. Amelia, who had been quietly observing from her armchair, finally spoke. Claire, she said gently, love isn't enough. These girls need stability, safety, and consistency. Can you give them that? Claire wiped her tears, nodding fervently. I'm trying. I'll do whatever it takes. Ethan crossed his arms. Then prove it. Go through CPS. Show us you're serious. Until then, Sophie and Lily stay here. Claire looked at the girls one last time. I'll do it, she said. I'll prove myself. I promise. As Claire left, Ethan felt a mix of anger and pity. He turned to Sophie and Lily, kneeling beside them. No matter what happens, I'm here for you. You're safe with us. Lily leaned into him, whispering, Don't let her take us. I won't, Ethan vowed, holding them close. Not until we're sure she can give you the life you deserve. Amelia nodded, her voice firm. This is your home now, and we'll fight to keep it that way. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Ethan knew the battle to keep Sophie and Lily safe was only beginning. Every free moment was spent gathering evidence, consulting with professionals, and documenting everything he could about the girls' time with him and Amelia. Linda Carter returned for another visit, her demeanor more formal than before. Ethan, Claire has contacted us, she said. She's begun proving her sobriety and fitness as a parent. You should prepare for the possibility that the court might favor reunification. Ethan's frustration was palpable. And what about the years of neglect? The time she left them hungry and scared? Isn't that enough to show she's not fit to raise them? Linda softened. The system prioritizes family reunification, but that doesn't mean we ignore her past. Your role in their lives will be considered, especially if you demonstrate that staying with you and Amelia is in their best interest. After Linda left, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, staring at the growing pile of documents. Medical reports from Dr. Blake detailed Sophie and Lily's repeated injuries and signs of neglect. Amelia added her testimony, describing how the girls had flourished under their care. Ethan knew they needed more, something undeniable. He decided to seek outside help. The following day, he met with Sarah Jones, a family law attorney recommended by a colleague. Sarah listened intently as Ethan described the situation, her sharp eyes narrowing with focus. This will be a tough fight, Sarah admitted. But you have a strong case. Courts want stability for children, and you can show that you've provided it. The key is proving that Claire's improvement isn't enough to outweigh the harm she's already caused. What about the girls? Ethan asked. They're terrified of going back to her. Sarah nodded. Their voices matter, especially Sophie since she's older. But the court will also weigh Claire's progress. It's crucial to remain calm and cooperative. Judges don't respond well to hostility. Ethan thanked her, feeling both reassured and overwhelmed. As he left the office, he thought of Sophie and Lily, their trust in him growing stronger each day. He couldn't let them down. The first supervised visitation with Claire was scheduled for the following week. Ethan's stomach churned as he drove Sophie and Lily to the neutral meeting center. The girls sat silently in the back seat, their faces pale. Amelia had wanted to come, but Ethan insisted on handling it alone. Claire was already waiting in the small, brightly lit room when they arrived. She looked nervous, clutching a folder of papers she assumed were proof of her progress. A social worker stood nearby, ready to observe. "Hi, girls," Claire said softly as Sophie and Lily entered. "It's so good to see you." Lily hid behind Sophie, refusing to meet her mother's gaze. Sophie, ever the braver one, sat down stiffly in one of the chairs. "Hi," she said, her tone guarded. Claire tried to smile. "I brought some pictures," she said, pulling out old photos of the girls as toddlers. "Do you remember this? It was your birthday. We had cupcakes with sprinkles." Sophie glanced at the photo but didn't respond. Lily peeked over her sister's shoulder, then whispered, "Why did you leave us?" Claire's smile faltered. "I didn't mean to," she said, trembling. I thought you'd be better off. I wasn't in a good place." "But you didn't come back," Lily pressed, her tiny voice breaking. Tears welled in Claire's eyes. "I know. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to fix it." The social worker intervened gently, redirecting the conversation. "Let's focus on the present, Claire. What steps are you taking to rebuild trust?" Claire nodded, wiping her tears. "I've been attending AA meetings regularly. I have a job now, and I'm staying in a sober living facility. I want to be the mom they deserve." Ethan watched from across the room, his emotions a mix of anger and pity. Claire's remorse seemed genuine, but he couldn't ignore the damage she had already done. As the visit continued, Sophie and Lily remained cautious, answering Claire's questions with short, hesitant responses. When the hour was up, Lily clung to Ethan as they prepared to leave. Sophie paused at the door, turning back to look at her mother. "Are you better now?" she asked. Claire nodded fervently. "I'm trying, Sophie. I promise." The drive home was quiet. Ethan glanced at the rearview mirror, his heart breaking at Lily's tear-streaked face. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe with me and Amelia." Later that night, as the girls played quietly in the living room, Ethan sat down with Amelia to discuss the visit. "She seemed sincere," he admitted, "but I'm not sure it's enough. The girls are still scared." Amelia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Claire has a long road ahead of her. The court may give her another chance, but that doesn't mean we give up. We've given these girls a home, Ethan. We've shown them what love and safety look like. That matters." Ethan sighed, rubbing his temples. "I just want what's best for them." Amelia placed a hand on his arm. "So do I. And that's why we'll keep fighting." The day of the preliminary custody hearing arrived faster than Ethan had anticipated. The courthouse loomed ahead, its grand pillars a stark contrast to the smallness he felt walking in with Sophie and Lily. Amelia walked beside them, her frail hand gripping his arm for support. Sarah Jones, their attorney, met them at the entrance with a stack of meticulously prepared files. "Stay calm," Sarah advised, her voice steady. "The court will want to hear your side, but remember, this isn't just about proving Claire's unfitness. It's about showing the stability and love you provide." Ethan nodded, gripping Sophie and Lily's hands tightly as they entered the courtroom. The girls looked around nervously, their eyes taking in the formal setting. Across the room, Claire sat with her lawyer, looking more composed than he'd ever seen her. A pang of unease hit Ethan. Had she truly changed? And if she had, was it enough to justify taking the girls away? The hearing began with procedural formalities before the judge. A stern woman named Eleanor Hawkins addressed the courtroom. We are here to determine temporary custody arrangements for Sophie and Lily Bennett. I have reviewed the preliminary reports, but must hear testimony from all parties. Sarah rose first, presenting the evidence Ethan had painstakingly gathered. Medical records detailed years of neglect, malnutrition, and injuries. Photos from their time with Claire painted grim pictures, while more recent image saw the girls thriving with Ethan and Amelia highlighted the stark contrast. Your Honor, Sarah concluded, her tone resolute. These girls have found stability and love in the Crawford home. Removing them now would cause significant emotional and psychological harm. Claire's lawyer countered, emphasizing her progress. Ms. Bennett has completed 6 months of sobriety, secured employment, and begun therapy. She acknowledges her past mistakes, but is committed to being a better mother. Then came the most challenging part. Sophie and Lily were called to speak privately with the judge. Ethan watched as they were led away, his chest tight with worry. He could only hope that their voices would be heard. The girls returned after what felt like an eternity. Sophie clung to Lily, her expression unreadable. Judge Hawkins addressed the room, her voice even but firm. This is a challenging case. On the one hand, we have a mother demonstrating genuine efforts to improve. Conversely, we have a household where the children have flourished. Ethan held his breath as the judge continued. For now, I will grant Ethan and Amelia Crawford temporary custody. Ms. Bennett will have supervised visitation rights, with the possibility of expanded custody if she continues her progress. Relief flooded through Ethan, though it was tempered by the knowledge that the fight was far from over. Claire's expression was a mix of disappointment and determination as she nodded solemnly. The judge's words echoed in Ethan's mind. If she continues her progress, outside the courtroom, Claire approached them hesitantly. I'm glad they're safe with you, she said, her voice soft. I'll keep working on myself. I hope one day they'll trust me again. Ethan nodded, his feelings conflicted. That's all we want, for them to feel safe. That evening, the Crawfords returned home exhausted but relieved. Amelia cooked a simple dinner while Sophie and Lily played quietly in the living room. As Ethan watched them, his thoughts drifted back to the courtroom and the day's revelations. After dinner, Sophie tugged at his sleeve. Ethan, can we talk? He knelt beside her, giving her his full attention. Of course. What's on your mind? Sophie hesitated, glancing at Lily, who sat nearby drawing. When we talked to the judge, I told her something I didn't tell you. Ethan's heart clenched. What is it, Sophie? She bit her lip, her small hands twisting nervously. Sometimes I miss Mom, but I'm scared of her too. Is that bad? Ethan's chest tightened. He hugged her, his voice steady despite the lump in his throat. It's not bad at all. It's okay to feel both. People are complicated, and so are families. What matters is that you're safe now, and we'll figure everything else out together. Sophie leaned into him, her small frame trembling slightly. I told the judge I want to stay here, but I also said I want Mom to get better. You were brave to say that, Ethan said, his voice filled with pride. And it's okay to hope she gets better. We all want that. After the girls went to bed that night, Ethan sat with Amelia in the dimly lit kitchen. Sophie said she misses Claire, he confessed. She's scared of her but still loves her. Amelia nodded, her face thoughtful. Love and fear often walk hand in hand, especially for children. Sophie and Lily must know they have a choice now. They're not powerless anymore. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Do you think Claire can change? I don't know, Amelia admitted. But what I do know is that those girls trust you. And as long as they have you, they'll be okay. Weeks passed, and life in the Crawford household settled into a cautious rhythm. Sophie and Lily began to adapt to their new sense of stability, but the shadow of uncertainty lingered. Claire continued to attend her supervised visits, and though each meeting was carefully managed, the girls remained wary. One chilly Saturday morning, Ethan decided to take Sophie and Lily to the local park. Amelia, feeling particularly energized, insisted on joining them. The girls ran ahead, their laughter carried on the crisp winter air, while Ethan and Amelia sat on a bench watching them. She's trying, Amelia said, breaking the silence. Claire? Ethan asked, his tone skeptical. Yes. I can see it in her eyes when she looks at the girls. There's regret, but also determination. It's difficult to rebuild a life after what she's been through. Ethan sighed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. I want to believe she's sincere. But what if she can't follow through? What if the girls go back to him and it all falls apart again? That's why we're here, Amelia said firmly. To give them a safety net. No matter what happens, they'll always have us. Ethan nodded, her words bringing some comfort. But his mind remained troubled. He wanted what was best for Sophie and Lily, but figuring out what that was felt impossibly complex. As they returned home that afternoon, they found Linda Carter waiting on the porch. Her expression was guarded, not unkind. Ethan, Amelia, Linda began, her voice measured. Claire's made a formal request for unsupervised visitation. Ethan stiffened. Already? It's only been a few months. Linda raised a hand to calm him. She's met the initial criteria: consistent attendance at meetings, employment, and clean drug tests. The court is considering her request, but they'll require a home visit to evaluate her living situation. And if the home visit goes well? Amelia asked, her voice steady but concerned. It could lead to gradual overnight visits, Linda replied. This isn't unusual, but preparing for the possibility is important. After Linda left, Ethan sat at the dining table, staring at the empty chair. This is moving too fast, he muttered. The girls aren't ready. Amelia placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Then we make sure their voices are heard. They're stronger than you think, Ethan. The day of the court-ordered home visit arrived with an air of tension. Ethan accompanied Linda to Claire's small apartment, a modest but tidy space in a sober living facility. Claire greeted them at the door, her nervousness evident in how she smoothed her hands over her jeans. Thank you for coming, she said quietly, stepping aside to let them in. As Linda began her assessment, Ethan observed the surroundings. The walls were sparsely decorated, but a small table in the corner caught his eye. On it sat framed pictures of Sophie and Lily, alongside a handwritten note. For my girls. I'm working hard for you every day. Claire noticed his gaze and smiled faintly. I keep that there to remind myself why I'm doing this. Claire, Ethan said carefully, what happens if you struggle again? If things get hard? She looked down, her hands trembling slightly. I won't let that happen. I can't. But if I do, I'll ask for help. I won't let them suffer because of me again. Her honesty surprised him, but it didn't erase his doubts. As Linda wrapped up her evaluation, Claire turned to Ethan. I know you don't trust me, and I don't blame you. But I'm trying to be someone they can be proud of. Ethan nodded curtly, his emotions conflicted. We'll see what the court decides. The final custody hearing arrived on a gray, overcast morning. Ethan, Amelia, Sophie, and Lily entered the courtroom together, their presence a unified front. Across the aisle, Claire sat alone, her expression a mix of hope and apprehension. Judge Eleanor Hawkins began the session with her characteristic calm authority. We are here to determine the next steps in the custody arrangement for Sophie and Lily Bennett. I have reviewed all reports and testimonies. This is a sensitive case, requiring careful consideration. The court heard from Linda, who detailed Claire's progress, and Sarah, who presented a compelling argument for maintaining the girls' stability with Ethan and Amelia. Finally, Judge Hawkins addressed Sophie and Lily directly. Sophie, Lily, the judge said gently, your thoughts matter. Do you feel safe and happy where you are? Sophie, holding Lily's hand tightly, nodded. We feel safe with Ethan and Amelia. But we want to see Mom too. Just not all the time. The judge nodded, her expression thoughtful. Thank you for sharing that. It helps me understand what you need. After a brief recess, Judge Hawkins delivered her decision. Primary custody will remain with Ethan and Amelia Crawford. Ms. Bennett will be granted unsupervised daytime visits, possibly expanding to overnight stays if progress continues. This arrangement prioritizes the children's stability while allowing for their mother's involvement. Relief and gratitude washed over Ethan as the ruling was finalized. Claire approached them afterward, her eyes glistening with tears. Thank you, she said softly, for taking care of them, for giving them what I couldn't. Ethan extended a hand. Keep working on yourself, Claire. They deserve the best version of you. Months later, the Crawford household buzzed with the warmth of spring. Sophie and Lily flourished, their laughter filling the house as they played in the garden. Claire visited regularly, slowly rebuilding trust with her daughters. Stronger than ever, Amelia reveled in her role as their grandmother figure. One sunny afternoon, as the family gathered around the dining table for lunch, Sophie looked up at Ethan and said, "We're lucky to have such a big family now." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "Yes, we are. And no matter what, we'll always be here for each other." Though the road ahead would have its challenges, one thing was clear. Their unconventional family, built on love, resilience, and forgiveness, had found its way. Together, they were ready to face whatever the future held.